Welcome to PC Games Nostalgia, where we talk about yesterday's PC games today. My name is Jimmy Wilhelmsson, and I'm going to be your host for the next 20 minutes or so. The title we're going to probe into today is Each time, we bring a guest from the gaming industry to our digital studio, and today's honored guest star is Miss Angelica Norgren from Raw Fury. Welcome, Angelica Norgren. May I call you Angelica?
Of course, Jimmy, of course.
Thank you. We are here to talk about Dark Souls. I have to admit to all viewers beforehand that I have actually never played Dark Souls. This will be abundantly clear. I'm just going to tell you in advance. I've seen people play it, but never played it myself, so bear with me if I'm saying stupid things. But before we do that, could you tell me a little about Raw Fury, the studio you're working at right now?
So Raw Fury is an indie publisher. So we publish indie games, and my role there is as an experienced producer for Kingdom Two Crowns.
Experienced producer.
Experience.
Okay.
It's a sort of quality role. So you can say that I'm in charge of the game's quality.
Okay.
So I lead the test team. I make sure that the coders have all the information they need to fix any bugs that might pop up. I also work closely with the design director to come up with cool stuff for our upcoming expansions and other projects. So we're a pretty small team. So I get to be involved in almost every part of both making and publishing the game, which is awesome.
Nice.
It's really fun.
And what you're working on now, is that a secret or is there something you can talk about?
I can talk about what we just recently released.
Please do.
So Kingdom Two Crowns is it's a side-scrolling micro-strategy game, basically. You are a ruler with a golden crown, and you command your subjects and build up your kingdom and try to protect it from the greed that attacks during the night. So it's this beautiful pixel art game. It has a lovely soundtrack, and I've been loving this series for a long time. And Two Crowns, the game that I'm working on now, released in 2018. So I joined last year, so I've been working on expansions for the game. So I wasn't there for the actual release of the game, but I've been adding some cool stuff to the game. So about a month ago, we released a free expansion called Deadlands, and that is like a new campaign setting. And we did a crossover with Bloodstained, and that's a Japanese game from Koji Igarashi, and he's the creator of Castlevania Symphony of the Night. So just like someone who's been a gamer for a really long time, that's kind of a dream thing to do, to work with such a legend in the game industry. So we brought some of the Bloodstained characters to life in Kingdom and created this spooky gothic world for all players to explore. So that released a month ago, and it was just amazing to see the response from players to that.
And to those people who live in Sweden, Angelica made herself quite a name when she started blogging. You were called Xbox Flickan, which literally translates to the Xbox girl. Tell me a little bit about how that came to be.
I mean, I moved away from home, and I was around 20 years old, and I identified as a gamer. I love playing games, but I was missing like a platform to talk about that. I mean, I hang around on forums a lot, but I didn't really talk about games in the way that I wanted to talk about games, because I was reading a lot of fashion blogs that were a lot of female bloggers were talking about clothes and fashion, and I thought that was super interesting. So
and when was this?
Kind of where it was?
When was this? 2000 and...
When?
Yeah.
Oh, 2007.
Okay.
So it was quite a while back, and I wanted to try doing that, but about games. So I wanted to write about games in a kind of different way. So I started a blog. I just bought an Xbox 360, and I started writing about what I was playing and what I was doing. And I was kind of alone at the start, but people well, the blog industry kind of exploded and people started joining, and there was this whole blog community. And, I got to go to events abroad and travel and review games and do so much fun stuff around that.
I remember meeting you at one of those press conferences. I was not as great writer as Angelica here, but I was for a brief time working for Swedish Eurogamer. You remember that?
Yeah.
So we met quite a few times.
Yeah.
And she was quite the celebrity.
But I wouldn't say I was like a good writer or anything. I never really liked writing about games. I just thought it was fun talking about games and making videos and, getting comments and meeting people. So I never thought that like, oh, I'm such a good game journalist. So the natural progression of that was me getting into podcasting, which eventually opened the doors to me getting a job as a radio host on Swedish public service national radio. So I got to host a completely new show that was called P3 Spel, or P3 Games. And P3 is like the Swedish youth channel from public service. So I was hosting that, and I did that up until last year, from 2011 up until 2019. So almost 9 years I was leading that radio show. And in the end, I was doing a lot of documentaries and super interesting productions. So that was so much fun. I loved doing that.
The great thing about interviewing journalists is that you do not really have to ask that many questions. It just pours out of them. I love that.
Yeah.
It's very comfy here in my chair, and this is going to be a great show. I'm not needed.
In the age of ancients, the world was unformed, shrouded by fog.
About this game, you chose, when I asked you what game do you want to talk about, what game brings nostalgia to you, and you chose Dark Souls, which is a game from this period of time. It's a game from 2011. What were your thoughts?
Well, I think like anyone who knows me knows that I'm a big fan of Dark Souls. It's such a huge part of why I love games. As I said before, I've played games since I was a little kid. I played games like forever. But something happened when I discovered Dark Souls, or even actually Demon's Souls, the game that came before, that was a PlayStation 4 game.
Right.
PlayStation 3, sorry. And it was like something just ignited inside of me. It was like this newfound love of gaming that I hadn't felt in years. I just fell completely in love with the game, with the world, with the experience, with the challenge. And it just felt so good. And I don't know, I've been playing the Souls series ever since.
And you're not the only one, because this game has a lot of followers, even though it's pretty old today. And it's even been considered by many the best RPG ever created. Why is that?
Well, I think they did a lot of things right, but mostly they did a lot of things in their own way. From Software, that's a Japanese company, and they've just been doing things in such interesting ways. And I felt like they were treating me as a player as a real person that they would put trust in. And they would expect me to, take the challenge of the game, overcome the difficulties, and actually improve myself as a player. I think around the time when the first Demon's Souls and Dark Souls came, people were getting kind of used to having their handheld. They were like you would have an arrow pointing in the direction you were supposed to go. The game would auto-save for you every second. You weren't really on edge in the way that you are when you play Dark Souls. Because when you play Dark Souls, especially like the first time around, you know that every enemy you meet is an enemy that can kill you.
Because that's what it is. It's a brutally difficult game, right?
In one way, yeah. Like if you know one thing about Dark Souls, it's probably that it's super difficult. But to me, I wouldn't say that it's hard. It's not so much about get good, like people like to say. Mm-hmm. I think it's about learning from your mistakes. It's about being rewarded for being patient and being punished for being greedy. When you die in Dark Souls, most of the time, you know why. you know what you did wrong. You probably didn't check your surroundings. You took on more enemies than you possibly could manage. You weren't prepared for a boss fight.
It's your fault.
All those things. Yes, that's the feeling you always would get. Like, I up and it's my fault. It's like I couldn't get mad at the game. I got mad at myself.
Yeah.
And I got better. I tried again. And that feeling when you, like, I could be stuck at a boss fight for days. And when I finally managed to beat that goddamn boss, that feeling was just amazing. And I wouldn't have had that feeling if they didn't put the challenge for me. And if I didn't feel like they trusted me to overcome this challenge. And I knew I could. I just needed to, get it right, learn the boss fight, learn what to, how to respond, don't be greedy. All those things just came together. And when you manage, it's such an incredible feeling.
We're going to get back to the difficulty level. What I would like to address now is some people might ask themselves, wait a minute, Dark Souls, is that really a PC game? Because it was first released on PlayStation and Xbox, of course. So why do we bring it up here?
So it came to console in 2011, and there was a PC port made the year after that because people wanted a PC port. They were asking for it. The problem was that From Software weren't really experienced in doing PC ports. They were a console company.
They're Japanese.
Yeah. I mean, the PC market is not really big in Japan, even today.
Yeah.
So the problem was when they made this PC port, it was pretty much just like bare bones. They didn't do any of the optimizations or like giving players the options that they were used to in PC games. So it was, well, to put it bluntly, a really shitty port.
Okay.
So people got so upset. There were no improved FPS. There were no upscale graphics or anything like that. So shortly after this shitty port release, and we're talking a couple of hours at most, not days, there was a mod released that would allow players to change the resolution of the game, and that made a huge difference. So if you were one of the players that were around playing Dark Souls when it was released for PC, you remember probably that you needed to download something called DSFix. That was like a must for anyone.
So where did that come from?
Oh, that was the guy who made that. And that guy actually moved on and created a porting studio a couple of years later. So
we had that checked up. Yes, his name is Peter Thoman. He's from Austria, I think. His nickname is Durante. I guess it's from the singer Jimmy Durante. I don't know. Sounds like a cool guy to talk to about this. So he founded PH3 Games. That was quite recently, and they're doing PC ports.
Yeah, he made a shitty port playable, so he made a lot of Dark Souls players happy.
A lifesaver. Back to the actual game. Dark Souls is an RPG. You said it was a successor to Demon's Souls. Is there a story? Is there a narrative, or does that not matter? Or what is there a driving force to know more about the story, or how does that work?
There definitely is, but it's not on the nose in any way. It's a really big mystery.
Heat and cold, life and death, and of course, light and dark.
There are a lot of ideas on the lore of the world and what happens and the story and the history.
Okay.
So the game doesn't really tell you outright what is going on. Sometimes, characters talk a little bit and you can read the descriptions on items and get some clues and hints, but it's not like you have to understand the story. But for those players who want to delve deeper into this world, there is a lot to discover.
Could you tell us, do you have a special memory about a special boss or a special situation or anything else that could explain your love for this brutally hard game that you do not think is that hard?
So this is actually not a Dark Souls thing, it's a Demon Souls thing, but it's something it's a tradition that has continued through the series. So I'm going to talk about how it started in Demon Souls.
Sure.
And that was a character called Yurt the Silent Chief. And this is a guy you find locked in a cage, and he has this armor on with 2 horns on the helmet, and he's armed to the teeth. He's got this booming voice, and he asks you to release him, to let him out of the cage. And he says he's on your side and he wants to fight the demons just as you do. So if you decide to let him out, because you have a choice, he eventually joins your hub, which is called the Nexus, and that's where that's your safe haven. That's where all the characters are, the stores, the NPCs. But as you progress in the game, after inviting Yurt back to your Nexus, eventually bodies start turning up. So it starts with like nameless bodies. Okay. You're like, someone has died here. And every time you come back, you find someone new has been murdered. And they don't come back. I mean, this is Demon Souls and Dark Souls. They're harsh, you know? If you accidentally hit an NPC, you can kill them, and you won't have access to whatever they were doing for you.
Right.
So if you kill a storekeeper, you know, you can't shop there anymore. So I mean, having this crazy assassin running wild in your what you thought was your safe haven, that's just blows my mind. Like, why would they do that? Like, of course you're gonna save and release a character when they ask you, because you've learned to say yes to everything in games. Like you think you're safe there, but you're really not. So if you figure out that it's Yurt who's doing all the killing here, you can kill him whenever you want and just put a stop to it. But if you don't, because you know there are a lot of people in the Nexus, you can't be sure that it's him. Eventually, when he killed enough important people, he will try to kill you as adding one last kill to his list.
Okay.
So that turns into a boss fight. But I think that's cool. The game toys with your trust.
Do you ever, I mean, have you played Dark Souls since it was released? Have you gotten back to it? There have been many sequels to it, but have you actually played the first title of the series again?
Oh yeah, I keep coming back.
Really?
Because I was thinking about like, what am I going to talk about today? And I was like, oh, maybe I should pick up my Switch. You know, I got the remastered version there. I should play for a little while. So I keep coming back. The sad part is that it's hard to play Demon Souls since it was on PS3, and the servers are actually shut down, so you can't use any of the online functionalities unless you use a private server. Yeah, because that's one of the other things that I haven't talked so much about, but I think is really amazing in the Souls games, and that's how they utilize the online functionality. It's not necessarily that you play together with someone or PvP with someone. You can do that, but they also used other players' world and made them merge with yours. So you could see ghosts from other players. When they die, they could leave a ghost that could appear in other players' worlds. And you can leave a message on the ground that will show up in other players' worlds. So there was some sort of overlap without actually meeting. So imagine coming into a big clearing, and all you see on the ground are these red puddles of blood and ghosts. Like, you only see the ghost shapes, not what is killing them, but you see these ghosts dying over and over again. And that's kind of like, yeah, I'm coming into a boss fight right now.
I read somewhere that the producers of Stranger Things actually had Dark Souls as one of the inspirational sources to the world that you enter when strange things happen. Is there a special feeling, a mystical feeling? It almost sounds like that within Dark Souls.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that, but that sounds like, when you say it, like, yeah, of course. Okay. That's like worlds, like different dimensions merging together. So yeah, that makes total sense.
Okay, sorry interrupting you. You were telling me something else about the game.
Yeah, there is one thing that happens This is also Demon Souls, but it comes back in the other Souls games as well. I mean, Demon Souls did a lot of things that they used in the other games as well. But there is a boss called the Old Monk, and that is exactly what it sounds like. It's a really, really old guy, and he's sitting on a pile of chairs, really, really high up. And you're like, I'm gonna have to fight this dude. It's like I can sneeze at him and he will topple and become dust because he's just an old, stupid monk. And the thing is, what Old Monk does is that he summons another player to fight for him. He summons another player to be his champion. So you're not technically fighting a boss from the game. You're fighting another player, and this happens regardless. Like you wouldn't know even that it happens. It's not like, oh, I'm going into PvP mode. No, this is how this boss works. He brings another player into your world to kick your ass. And the cool thing is you can also be the ass-kicking player that gets to go to other worlds and be that champion for the Old Monk. And you get a really snazzy hat as a reward if you manage to beat the challenging players.
That's great.
I thought that was a really, really cool way to use like online functionality without really telling the players what the game was doing.
Returning to difficulty level, when Demon Souls came out, which I didn't play, the talk was this is a really unforgiving RPG. And then Dark Souls came out, and that was like this is a really, really unforgiving and tough RPG. I mean, you've been a gaming journalist for so many years. What is true? Are games more difficult or less difficult today? And are gamers better or worse than they used to be?
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is that back in the 80s, early 90s, you would get a game like for your birthday and then maybe for Christmas. And then you would play that game for months and months and months. And if we look at how we purchase games today and how many games that are released today, it's a whole different market. I mean, anyone that has a Steam account can look at their backlog, like the pile of shame. What have I not played yet? I mean, you buy all these games on sales, and I mean, look at Epic. You get games for free every week.
Yeah.
So we have a lot more games to play. So if you meet a challenge that is hard to overcome, it's so easy to just put the game away and play something else.
You used to be a journalist, and now you're in the gaming industry yourself. From what I learned about what you're saying now, it's not that hard to make a hard game. You just bring in more HP to the boss, or you're bringing more enemies to fight. But it seems hard to make a game hard and still interesting enough for you to keep trying. Am I correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you don't want players to give up and just,
this is a stupid game. It's too hard. I don't want to play it anymore.
Yeah. And it's also a lot, like that's something that I think a lot about when working on Kingdom.
Okay.
Because that's a game where we don't necessarily tell the players that much about how things work or what things do or what you're supposed to do. It's a lot about the discovery. And we know that players, they can just Google, they can go to a wiki page and check out everything. They can find all the secrets and all the tactics and everything in the game. But that doesn't necessarily make the experience better. So, we try to trust them to discover the game at their own pace in a way that suits their way to play. So yeah, I think there's really something in Dark Souls about, trusting players to experience the world at their own pace.
I think that's one thing that we have learned in the last 10 years, maybe with games like Dark Souls, that failure has to be educating, not only stopping you. Game over, you're dead, you suck. But
you need to learn something.
Exactly.
Or progress in some other way. Yeah.
And I like that because that sounds like a way to educate society. Don't give up. I mean, you will fail, but you learn something. Not just what is that? It's Baldur's Gate, I think, that keep telling you will learn, and you don't. You just die. But here in those games, maybe you have more of a learning curve that you get better after dying. Tremendous amount of times.
You might think after 25 tries that you would have learned how to defeat the boss, but that's not always the case. Right. But I think it's also a lot about mindset. So the thing is, like, I either play to progress or I play to level up. And if I play to progress, I don't even look at that number. I consider every like piece of currency, every soul that I pick up, I consider almost already lost. Because when I progress into a new area, I have no idea what I'm gonna meet, but I know I'm probably gonna get my ass kicked. So if I don't get attached to those souls that I've collected, I won't get so mad when I lose them. So and then other times I play to level up, and then I maybe play in an area that I'm a little bit more comfortable with. Yeah. That's somewhere there where I know that I will survive and I will be able to guard and, you know, collect enough of that currency to actually be able to use it. So that's a way to protect myself from failure and from, you know, losing a ton of things and crying into my pillow at night.
Thank you for those words of wisdom. I want to thank you also for being here with us. Thank you so much, Angelica Nguyen, and I hope you wish you the best of luck at Raw Fury and whatever games you have in the future.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk about Dark Souls.
Maybe I will even play it now when the PC fix is what, 10 years old or whatever.
Well, there's actually a remastered version out, so I mean, I would recommend that one.
I will do that and come back and tell you how it went. Thank you so much, Angelica. Hope to see you soon. Bye.